My hands trembled as I held the phone. The screen showed a number I never thought I'd see again, my son's number. But that was impossible. My boy had been gone for 15 years. Then the voice came through, scared and confused. Mom, I don't have much time. Where am I? My heart stopped. How could this be happening? After all these years of grief and acceptance, was my son somehow reaching out to me? What I discovered that night changed everything I thought I knew about love, memory, and the connections that bind us together, even across time. It was just another Tuesday. Nothing special about it. That's how life had settled for me after all these years. Predictable. Safe. A bit lonely but manageable. My name is Margaret Wilson. Everyone calls me Maggie. I'm 63 years old, living in the same two-bedroom house in Millfield that I've owned for nearly 40 years now. It's a small town where not much changes. The kind of place where the pharmacy still has a soda fountain, and people still wave when they drive past you on the street. My day started like any other. I woke up at 6:30, made a pot of coffee, and sat in my favorite chair by the window. The morning light filtered through the kitchen curtains. The yellow ones with little daisies that my daughter Jenny helped me pick out last spring. Jenny says they brighten up the place. She's always trying to add color to my life. I sipped my coffee and looked at the photographs on my mantelpiece. Family pictures spanning decades. My wedding day. Jenny's high school graduation. And right in the center, a photo of my son Daniel. Forever 22 years old. Smiling that crooked smile of his. One dimple deeper than the other. His baseball cap turned backward, just like he always wore it, even though I told him it looked silly. Morning, Mom. Jenny's voice came from behind me as she walked into the kitchen, already dressed for work in her nurse's scrubs. At 38, she's the spitting image of me at her age. Except her eyes are all her father's. Warm brown instead of my blue ones. Jenny has lived with me for the past 3 years, ever since her divorce. Some might think it's strange for a grown woman to move back in with her mother, but it's worked out well for both of us. She says she's saving for her own place, but I think we both know that's not the whole truth. She worries about me being alone. I made some toast, I said, pushing a plate toward her. And there's still plenty of coffee. Jenny grabbed a piece of toast, buttered it quickly and glanced at her watch. Thanks, Mom. I'm running late for my shift. Mrs. Peterson is coming in for her checkup today, and you know how she likes to arrive 20 minutes early just to chat. I nodded, smiling. Mrs. Peterson was notorious for her chatter. Give her my best. Tell her those flower arrangements she did for the community center looked beautiful. Will do. Jenny kissed my cheek, grabbed her bag, and headed for the door. I'll be home around 8. Don't forget your book club is today at 3. I won't forget, I assured her, though we both knew there was a good chance I might. My memory isn't what it used to be. After Jenny left, the house felt quiet. Too quiet sometimes. I filled the silence with little tasks. Washing the breakfast dishes, watering my houseplants, folding the laundry I'd left in the dryer overnight. Simple routines that structured my days. Later, I walked to the grocery store 3 blocks away. The October air was crisp, leaves crunching beneath my feet. I nodded to Mr. Harrison tending his front garden, and stopped to pet the Cooper's retriever, who always greets everyone passing by. At the store, I picked up a few essentials: milk, bread, apples, and some chicken for dinner. Sarah, the checkout girl, asked about Jenny and reminded me about the fall festival coming up that weekend. You should come, Mrs. Wilson, she said as she bagged my groceries. They're having a pie contest this year. Maybe, I replied with a smile, though I knew I probably wouldn't go. Large gatherings had become difficult for me over the years. Too much noise, too many people asking how I was doing, looking at me with that mixture of pity and awkwardness that never quite goes away when you've lost a child. Back home, I put away the groceries and made myself a cup of tea. I decided to look through some old photo albums to pass the time. In my bedroom closet on the top shelf sat 5 large albums. I pulled down the blue one, Daniel's high school years. I hadn't looked at these photos in quite some time. It still hurt, even after 15 years, but the pain had dulled from a sharp stab to a persistent ache. I settled on the couch and opened the album. There he was, Daniel at 16, awkward and lanky, his arms too long for his body. By 18, he'd grown into his height, confident and handsome at his graduation. I traced my finger over his face in the photographs. "Oh, Danny," I whispered. "Your sister misses you." "I miss you." Daniel had been gone for 15 years, 2 months, and 6 days. Not that I was counting anymore. Not consciously, at least. But some part of me always knew exactly how long it had been since that rainy April night when a police officer knocked on my door. A car accident, they said. Slippery roads. He'd died instantly. No pain. That's what everyone assured me. As if that somehow made it easier. The grief counselor I saw for years afterward told me that eventually, I would be able to remember Daniel without it hurting so much. That I'd focus more on the happiness of having had him in my life, rather than the pain of losing him. She was right, in a way. Most days now, I could think of him, talk about him even without breaking down. But there were still moments, like when I heard a certain song on the radio, or when I saw a young man with that same swagger in his walk, when the grief felt as fresh as it did 15 years ago. I flipped through the album, smiling at the memories. Daniel's first car, a beat-up Chevy he'd saved up for by mowing lawns all summer. His senior prom, where he took Katie Matthews, the girl he'd had a crush on since 7th grade. His baseball team winning the regional championship, Daniel grinning ear to ear as he held up the trophy. The phone rang, startling me out of my reminiscing. It was Patty from my book club, checking if I was coming. I grabbed my purse and the book I hadn't quite finished, and headed out to the community center. The book club ladies were all around my age, some I'd known for decades, others were newer friends. We discussed the book, though I mostly listened since I hadn't finished it. Afterward, there was tea and cookies and the usual catching up on town gossip. When I got home, it was nearly 5:30. Jenny wouldn't be home for hours yet. I prepared dinner. Chicken, roasted potatoes, green beans. Simple food, but Jenny would appreciate a home-cooked meal after a long day at the clinic. While the chicken baked, I settled at the kitchen table with a crossword puzzle. The minutes ticked by peacefully. Outside, darkness fell. I turned on the porch light for Jenny and set the table for our dinner. By 8:15, the food was ready, but Jenny hadn't arrived home yet. Not unusual. Her shifts often ran late when patients needed extra care. I covered the food to keep it warm, and decided to watch some television while I waited. By 9, I'd started to worry a little. Jenny usually called if she was going to be very late. I tried her cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. "Hi honey, just checking in. Dinner's ready whenever you get home. Hope your day wasn't too crazy." By 10, my worry had deepened. I called the clinic, but the night receptionist said Jenny had left at the end of her shift at 8. I called her friend Lisa, who hadn't heard from her. I even called her ex-husband, but he hadn't spoken to Jenny in weeks. By 11, I was pacing the living room, my mind spinning with worst-case scenarios. Car accidents. Hospital emergencies. I kept calling Jenny's phone, but still no answer. At midnight, exhausted from worry, I finally sat down on the couch. Should I call the police? Was I overreacting? Jenny was a grown woman after all. Maybe she'd met friends for a drink and lost track of time. Maybe her phone battery had died. But she would have called from someone else's phone, wouldn't she? Jenny knew how I worried. I must have dozed off on the couch because the next thing I knew, I was startled awake by the sound of my phone ringing. The clock on the wall showed 3:07 a.m. Fumbling in the dark, I grabbed the phone from the coffee table. Relief flooded through me. Finally, Jenny was calling. But when I looked at the screen, my blood turned to ice. The caller ID didn't show Jenny's name. It showed Daniel's. My son Daniel, who had been dead for 15 years. My hand trembled as I stared at the screen. This wasn't possible. Daniel's number had been disconnected years ago. I'd kept paying the bill for months after he died, just to hear his voicemail message when I called, until Jenny gently suggested it was time to let it go. The phone continued to ring, Daniel's name flashing on the screen like some kind of cruel joke. I almost didn't answer it. Almost convinced myself I was dreaming. But then I pressed the button and lifted the phone to my ear. "Hello." My voice was barely a whisper. There was static on the line, and then a voice, a young man's voice, frightened and confused. "Mom, I don't have much time. Where am I? What's happening? My heart stopped. The voice sounded like Daniel. Not exactly as I remembered, but close enough to make my entire body go cold. Who is this? I managed to ask, my throat tight with fear and impossible hope. Mom, it's me, the voice said, sounding desperate now. I don't know where I am. It's dark. I'm scared. Please help me. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. This isn't funny. Who are you really? It's Danny, Mom. Please. I don't have much time. Something's wrong. I need to know where I am. Tears sprang to my eyes. It had been so long since I'd heard anyone call him Danny. That's what he'd called himself as a child, before he insisted on being called Daniel in high school. My son is dead, I said, my voice breaking. He died 15 years ago. There was a long pause, just the sound of breathing on the other end. 15 years, the voice finally said, quieter now. That can't be right. Mom, please. I'm so confused. Everything hurts. Please help me. And then, before I could respond, the line went dead. I sat in the dark, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to nothing. Tears streamed down my face as my mind raced with impossible thoughts. Had I just spoken to my dead son? Was I losing my mind? Was someone playing an unimaginably cruel prank? And through it all, one thought kept pushing through. Where was Jenny? Why wasn't she home? As if in answer to my unspoken question, my phone rang again. This time it was Jenny's number. I answered immediately. Jenny? Where are you? Are you okay? Mom. Jenny's voice was strange, tight with emotion. Mom, something's happened. I'm at Memorial Hospital. You need to come right away. My heart sank. Are you hurt? What's going on? I'm not hurt, she said quickly. I can't explain over the phone. Please, just come to the emergency room. Ask for Dr. Patel. Jenny, wait. But she had already hung up. I sat frozen for a moment, trying to process everything. The strange call from Daniel's number. Now Jenny at the hospital. Were these things connected? Was I still asleep, having some bizarre nightmare? I forced myself to move. I grabbed my coat, my purse, my keys. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely lock the door behind me. The drive to Memorial Hospital was a blur. My mind kept replaying that voice on the phone. I don't have much time. Where am I? It couldn't have been Daniel. My son was gone. Buried in Riverside Cemetery for 15 years. This was madness. Yet that voice had sounded so much like him. The hospital parking lot was nearly empty at this hour. I pulled into a space near the emergency entrance and hurried inside. The fluorescent lights were harsh after the darkness, making me squint as I approached the reception desk. I'm looking for my daughter, Jenny Wilson, I told the tired-looking woman behind the counter. She told me to ask for Dr. Patel. The woman nodded and picked up a phone. After a brief conversation, she looked back at me. Someone will be out to get you in a moment, Mrs. Wilson. Please have a seat. I couldn't sit. I paced the waiting area, my mind spinning with questions and fear. What had happened to Jenny? And what about that phone call? Had I imagined it? A door opened, and a young doctor in a white coat appeared. Mrs. Wilson? I'm Dr. Patel. Please come with me. I followed him through the double doors into the emergency department. Where's my daughter? Is she okay? Your daughter is fine, Dr. Patel assured me as we walked. She's with a patient. She asked me to bring you to her. We turned a corner, and there was Jenny, standing outside a hospital room. Her face pale and her eyes red as if she'd been crying. Mom, she said when she saw me, rushing forward to hug me tightly. Jenny, what's going on? What happened? Why are you here? Jenny pulled back, holding my shoulders, looking intently into my face. Mom, something incredible has happened. I don't know how to explain it. I don't understand it myself. What? I demanded, my patience wearing thin with fear and confusion. Just tell me. Jenny took a deep breath. There was an accident tonight. A young man was brought in unconscious, no identification. He'd been in a car crash on Route 16, the same stretch of road where... She paused, swallowing hard. Where Daniel's accident was. My stomach dropped at the mention of Daniel and his accident, especially after that phone call. The paramedics couldn't identify him, Jenny continued. But when they were going through his pockets looking for ID, they found an old flip phone. The battery was almost dead. They brought it with his personal effects. I started to feel dizzy, a strange humming in my ears. Mom, the phone started ringing. One of the nurses answered it, thinking it might be someone who could identify him. It was you on the other end. That's not possible, I whispered. The nurse gave me the phone when she heard you say Jenny's name, she went on, her voice shaking. It was Daniel's old number, Mom. Somehow, this young man had Daniel's old phone. I felt like the floor was tilting beneath me, but I didn't call anyone. I received a call from that number, a voice that sounded like Daniel. Jenny's eyes widened. That's not possible. The phone was here the whole time. Dr. Patel, who had been standing quietly nearby, stepped forward. Mrs. Wilson, your daughter asked me to examine this young man very carefully. His injuries aren't life-threatening. A concussion, some broken ribs, a fractured arm. But there's something else, something unusual. What? I asked, barely able to breathe. Dr. Patel hesitated, glancing at Jenny. Mom, Jenny said, her voice barely above a whisper. He looks like Daniel. Not exactly, he's older than Daniel was when we lost him. But the resemblance is striking. I shook my head, unable to process what she was saying. That's not possible. There's more, Jenny said. When he was brought in, he was delirious, in and out of consciousness. He kept asking for his mother, and he said his name was Danny. The hospital room was dim, just a small light above the bed illuminating the figure lying there. I stood in the doorway, unable to move, barely able to breathe. Jenny's hand was on my arm, steadying me. Mom, are you okay? I couldn't answer. My eyes were fixed on the young man in the hospital bed. His face was bruised, a bandage wrapped around his head, his right arm in a cast. But I could see enough of his features to understand why Jenny had called me. He resembled Daniel. Not identical. This man was older, maybe in his mid-30s. His jaw was stronger, his face more weathered. But the shape of his eyes, the line of his nose, the curve of his mouth, all eerily similar to my son. Who is he? I whispered. We don't know yet, Dr. Patel replied quietly. He had no identification on him. Just that old cell phone. The police are checking the car he was driving for registration information, but it may take some time. I took a tentative step into the room, drawn by a force I couldn't explain. As I approached the bed, the young man's eyes fluttered open. They were blue. Daniel's eyes had been blue. He looked at me, confusion clouding his face. Then something shifted in his expression. Recognition, surprise, relief. Mom, he said, his voice weak and hoarse. You came. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. Behind me, I heard Jenny's sharp intake of breath. I'm not. I began but couldn't finish. Wasn't this exactly what had happened in my nightmare after Daniel died? Dreams where he was alive, where he didn't recognize me, where I had to tell him over and over that I was his mother. The young man frowned, wincing as the movement pulled at his injuries. You look different, he murmured. Older. Dr. Patel stepped forward. Sir, do you know your name? The man's eyes flickered to the doctor, then back to me. Danny, he said softly. Daniel Wilson. My knees buckled. If Jenny hadn't been there to catch me, I would have collapsed to the floor. That's not possible. I heard myself say from far away. My son is dead. The man in the bed looked confused, then distressed. What? No. I'm right here. There's been some mistake. Dr. Patel placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. Mrs. Wilson, perhaps we should step outside for a moment. I allowed myself to be led from the room, my mind spinning, my heart torn between impossible hope and rational disbelief. In the hallway, Dr. Patel spoke in a low, serious voice. Mrs. Wilson, I understand how upsetting this must be. This young man appears to be experiencing some form of amnesia or confusion due to his head injury. It's not uncommon for concussion patients to be disoriented or to confabulate, to create false memories to fill in gaps. But how does he know my son's name? I demanded. How does he have Daniel's old phone? I don't have those answers, Dr. Patel admitted. The police are investigating. For now, the most important thing is to keep him calm and stable while he recovers. Mom, Jenny said, her face pale with worry. This is crazy. It can't be Daniel. It's been 15 years. I know that. I snapped, then immediately regretted my tone. I'm sorry, Kani. I don't understand what's happening. Neither do I, Jenny admitted. But we'll figure it out. Together. After Dr. Patel left, Jenny and I stood in silence for a long moment. What should we do? She finally asked. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I need to talk to him. Alone. Mom, I don't think. Please, Jenny. I need to do this. She hesitated, then nodded. I'll be right out here if you need me. I squared my shoulders and walked back into the hospital room. The young man's eyes were closed, but they opened as I approached the bed. Again, that flash of recognition. That soft smile that was so achingly familiar. Mom, he said. What's going on? Why did you say I was dead? I pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down, studying his face. Up close, the differences between this man and my son were more apparent. Fine lines around his eyes. A small scar on his chin that Daniel never had. But still, the resemblance was uncanny. What's the last thing you remember? I asked, keeping my voice as steady as I could. He frowned, concentrating. I was driving. It was raining. I was coming home from. His frown deepened. I can't remember where I was coming from. But I was on Route 16 near the bridge. Then, nothing until I woke up here. Route 16 near the bridge. Exactly where Daniel's accident had occurred 15 years ago. What year is it? I asked. He looked at me strangely. 2010 April. My breath caught. April 2010. The month and year Daniel died. It's not 2010, I said gently. It's 2025. His eyes widened. What? No, that's not. That's impossible. Do you remember anything about your life? Your job? Where you live? He started to nod, then stopped, his expression growing confused. I work at. He trailed off, looking lost. I can't remember. Why can't I remember? It's okay, I reassured him, though nothing about this situation was remotely okay. You have a concussion. Memory problems are normal. But you're my mom, he insisted. I remember you. And Jenny. My sister Jenny. My heart twisted. What else do you remember about your family? Dad, he said immediately. Dad is. His face clouded. Dad died. Heart attack. When I was 18. My hand flew to my mouth. Robert, my husband, had indeed died of a heart attack when Daniel was 18. What's happening to me? The young man asked, his voice breaking. Why don't I look right to you? Why are you looking at me like I'm a ghost? I couldn't hold back my tears any longer. Because my son Daniel Wilson died 15 years ago. In a car accident. On Route 16 near the bridge. In April 2010. He stared at me, shock and confusion warring on his face. That's not possible. I'm Daniel. I'm right here. Then how do you explain the fact that you look like you're in your 30s? I asked. Daniel was 22 when he died. He lifted his uninjured hand to his face, feeling his features as if trying to recognize himself by touch. I don't understand, he whispered. I don't understand any of this. Neither did I. But sitting there, looking into those familiar blue eyes, I felt something I hadn't felt in 15 years. A wild, irrational hope. A dangerous hope. The door opened, and Jenny stepped in looking concerned. Everything okay in here? Jenny, the man said, his face lighting up with recognition. You look different too. Your hair is shorter. Jenny approached cautiously, her nurse's professional demeanor taking over. Sir, I need you to understand something. My brother Daniel died 15 years ago. I don't know who you are or how you know things about our family, but you're confused. The doctor says that's normal with head injuries. I'm not confused about who I am, he insisted, then winced as he tried to sit up straighter. I'm Daniel Wilson. Your brother. I don't understand what's happening, but I know who I am. Jenny looked at me helplessly. Maybe we should let him rest, I suggested, standing up. The doctor said not to upset him. As we turned to leave, he called out, "Wait! Don't go. Please." I looked back at him, this stranger with my son's eyes. "What was the name of our dog?" he asked suddenly. "When we were kids. The dog with the crooked tail." Jenny and I exchanged glances. "Rusty," I said. "A golden retriever mix." He nodded, a triumphant look on his face. "And he used to steal socks from the laundry basket and hide them under the porch. And he was afraid of thunderstorms, so Dad built him a special bed in the laundry room where he felt safe." My knees felt weak again. Those details about Rusty weren't the kind of things a stranger could know. "And Jenny," he continued, looking at my daughter, "you broke your arm when you were 9, climbing the big oak tree in the backyard after I told you it wasn't safe. And you made me promise not to tell Mom and Dad that I dared you to climb it." Jenny's face went pale. "How do you know that?" "I never told anyone about the dare. Not even Mom." "Because I was there," he said simply. "I'm Daniel." A police officer arrived then, knocking on the open door. "Excuse me. I'm Officer Roberts. I need to ask a few questions about the accident." Jenny and I stepped back, grateful for the interruption. "We found the car registration," Officer Roberts said. "The vehicle is registered to a James Peterson from Burlington, Vermont. Does that name mean anything to you, sir?" The man in the bed frowned. "No. I've never heard that name before." "The car was reported stolen 3 days ago," the officer continued. "Mr. Peterson says it was taken from a shopping mall parking lot." "I didn't steal any car," the man protested. "I would never do that." After the officer left, I told the man I'd be back in the morning, not committing to believing or disbelieving. Outside the hospital, the night air was cool on my tear-stained face. Dawn was breaking, the sky turning a pale gray-pink in the east. "Mom, you can't possibly think that's really Daniel," Jenny said as we walked to our cars. "Of course not," I said quickly. "It's impossible. But then how does he know those things about us? About Rusty? About your broken arm?" Jenny shook her head. "I don't know. Maybe he knew Daniel somehow. Maybe Daniel told him stories about us. And he just happens to look like what Daniel might have looked like if he'd lived to be 35? And he just happens to have Daniel's old phone? And he just happens to have had an accident on the exact same stretch of road where Daniel died." I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. "I don't have answers," Jenny admitted. "But neither does he. And claiming to be your dead son. That's not normal, Mom. We need to be careful." She was right, of course. Whatever was happening here, we needed to proceed with caution. "Go home and get some sleep," Jenny urged. "I'll call you if anything changes." I nodded, too exhausted to argue. As I drove home in the early morning light, my mind kept returning to that phone call. The voice on the other end, scared and confused. "Mom, I don't have much time. Where am I?" If the phone had been at the hospital the whole time, how had I received that call? And if this man wasn't Daniel, how did he know so many intimate details about our family? I arrived home to find Daniel's photo album still on the couch where I'd left it hours earlier. I picked it up, turning to the last pages. The photos from the months before his death. His college graduation. The trip we took to the beach that summer. His new apartment in the city. Daniel, forever 22. I closed the album and held it to my chest. Tears flowing freely now. "Oh, Danny," I whispered into the quiet house. "Is it really you? Have you somehow come back to us?" The rational part of me knew it was impossible. People don't come back after 15 years. The dead don't return. But as I finally crawled into bed, exhaustion claiming me, one thought kept circling in my mind. What if the impossible had happened? What if, by some miracle I couldn't understand, my son had returned to me? And if not, who was the man in that hospital bed? And how did he know so much about us? Sleep claimed me before I could find any answers, my dreams filled with rain-slicked roads, ringing phones, and a voice calling out for help in the darkness. When I woke, it was past noon. I'd slept for nearly 7 hours, yet still felt exhausted. The events of the night before came rushing back. and for a moment, I wondered if it had all been a bizarre dream. But then my phone buzzed with a text message from Jenny. He's awake and asking for you. Fingerprint results came back negative. He's not in the system. Police still investigating. Not a dream then. I showered and dressed quickly, my mind racing with questions. Before leaving the house, I went to the hallway closet and dug out an old shoebox from the top shelf. Inside were Daniel's personal effects, the items that had been returned to me after his death. His wallet, his keys, his watch. I opened the wallet, finding his driver's license still tucked inside. Daniel James Wilson, the plastic card proclaimed. Born June 12, 1987. The photo showed his young face, serious for the camera. If he had lived, he would be 38 now. The man in the hospital looked about that age. I put the license in my purse and headed back to the hospital. In the daylight, Memorial Hospital looked less intimidating than it had in the middle of the night. I found my way back to the room where the stranger who claimed to be my son was being kept. Jenny was there, checking his vital signs with professional efficiency. She looked up when I entered, relief evident on her tired face. "Mom, good you're here. I need to run home and shower before my shift starts." "Has he said anything more?" I asked quietly. She shook her head. "Nothing that makes any sense. He still insists he's Daniel. Dr. Patel says his physical injuries are healing well, but..." She tapped her temple significantly. The man in the bed was awake, watching our exchange with those unnervingly familiar blue eyes. "You came back," he said when Jenny left, his voice stronger than it had been the night before. I said I would. I approached the bed cautiously, studying him in the daylight. The resemblance to Daniel was still there, but so were the differences. The lines around his eyes, the stronger jawline, the subtle signs of age that my son never had the chance to develop. "I brought something," I said, reaching into my purse. I pulled out Daniel's driver's license and held it up for him to see. "This is my son, Daniel Wilson." He took the license, studying it intently. Confusion crossed his face, then something like recognition. "This is me," he said. "Younger, but me." "That's not possible," I said gently. "This license belonged to my son who died 15 years ago." He handed the license back to me, his expression troubled. "I don't understand what's happening. I know I'm Daniel Wilson. I remember growing up in your house on Maple Street. I remember Dad teaching me to fish at Lake Henderson. I remember Jenny breaking her arm, and Rusty hiding socks, and the tree house in the backyard that Dad and I built when I was 10. Each memory he named was accurate, details of our family life that a stranger shouldn't know. I remember graduating from State University," he continued. "I remember my first apartment in the city. I remember calling you every Sunday night because you worried if you didn't hear from me." My hand trembled as I took back the license. "If you're really Daniel, what happened after April 2010? Where have you been for 15 years? His face clouded. I can't remember. It's like there's a wall in my mind. I remember driving in the rain, and then, nothing until I woke up here. My son died in a car accident in April 2010, I said, my voice breaking. We buried him. We mourned him. For 15 years he's been gone. I'm not dead, he insisted. I'm right here. I don't know how to explain it, but I'm Daniel, your son. A knock at the door interrupted us. Dr. Patel entered, accompanied by an older woman in a suit. Mrs. Wilson, this is Dr. Chun, our head of psychiatry, Dr. Patel introduced. Given the unusual nature of the situation, I thought it would be helpful to have her evaluate our patient. After extensive psychiatric evaluation, the man continued to maintain he was Daniel Wilson, my son. Despite all logical impossibility, Dr. Chun ordered additional tests, including checking for identifying marks that only family would know about. Daniel had a small birthmark on his left shoulder shaped like a half moon. This man had the exact same mark in the exact same place. Daniel had broken his right wrist playing football in high school. The doctor had said there would always be a slight bump where the bone healed. This man had that same subtle abnormality. These coincidences were becoming harder and harder to dismiss. Meanwhile, the police investigation continued. Officer Roberts informed us they'd traced the stolen car to a James Peterson from Burlington, Vermont. A former EMT who'd worked in Millfield 15 years ago. Peterson was now missing. Most shocking of all, according to police records, Peterson had been one of the first responders at Daniel's accident scene 15 years ago. Shortly after, he'd abruptly quit his job and moved away. The pieces weren't fitting together in any rational way, but they were fitting. 4 days after the accident, Dr. Patel declared the patient well enough to be discharged. With no place else for him to go, I offered to let him stay with me. A decision Jenny strongly questioned, but I couldn't explain even to myself. Something in me couldn't turn him away. As days passed, more unsettling connections emerged. Detective Harmon from the state police revealed they'd found photographs of my house in Peterson's apartment. He'd been watching me, watching our family for years. Why? And there were irregularities with Daniel's autopsy from 15 years ago. The medical examiner had later left his position under a cloud of scandal, accused of falsifying reports and mishandling evidence. One morning, I woke to find the man gone from the guest room, leaving only a note. "Mom, I remembered something. I need to check it out. I'll be back soon. Don't worry. D." The police were called, a search begun. What had he remembered? Was he running? Or searching for answers himself? He returned that night, soaking wet from the rain, his eyes wild with emotion. "I remembered," he whispered as he stood in our entryway at 3 a.m. "I remembered what happened that night." Over coffee at the kitchen table, he told a story that chilled me to the bone. It was raining that night, just like tonight. I was driving home from the city. I'd been at a job interview. Near the bridge, around a curve, I saw headlights in my lane. A pickup truck, driving too fast, out of control. I swerved to avoid it. My car skidded, hit the guardrail. The impact wasn't that bad, but the rail gave way. My car went down the embankment toward the creek. He continued, his hands gripping his mug tightly. I was dazed but conscious. Then there were lights, voices. Someone in a uniform, an EMT, climbing down to me. "James Peterson," I said quietly. I didn't know his name then, but I remember his face now. He reached the car, checked me over. I told him I thought I was okay. He gave me something. Said it was for the pain. An injection. I started to feel strange immediately. Everything went fuzzy. His breathing quickened as he continued. I heard him talking to someone else. Saying I was dead. Saying they needed to hurry. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, but I could hear everything. They pulled me from the car. Put me in a body bag. Jenny made a skeptical noise, but I motioned for her to be quiet. I was paralyzed but conscious, he went on. Terrified. They loaded me into an ambulance. But we didn't go to a hospital. We drove for hours. I drifted in and out of consciousness. When I fully woke up, I was in a cabin somewhere. Remote. Woods all around. And he was there. Peterson. He kept you prisoner? I asked, my voice shaking. For 15 years, he confirmed, his eyes meeting mine. Mom, I know how crazy this sounds. But he faked my death somehow. Another body, maybe. I don't know. All I know is that he kept me in that cabin, drugged most of the time in the early years. He said he was protecting me, that they would kill me if they found out I was alive. Who? Jenny asked, unable to hide her disbelief. Who would kill you? He never said exactly. Just them. Some kind of conspiracy he believed in. He ran a hand through his damp hair, frustrated. He was paranoid, delusional. But he was convinced that what he saw that night put us both in danger. What did he see? I pressed. The red pickup, he replied. The one that ran me off the road. He recognized it, or the driver. Someone powerful, someone dangerous. At least in his mind. The story was fantastical, impossible. Yet he told it with such conviction, such detail. We called Detective Harmon, who arrived quickly with Officer Roberts. They listened to the story in silence, their expressions revealing nothing. Can you show us where this cabin is? Detective Harmon finally asked. I think so, came the response. It's about 3 hours north, in the forest near the Canadian border. I've never been there except as a captive, but I believe I can find it again. The search for the mysterious cabin took 2 days. Detective Harmon called each evening with updates. They were following the directions provided, searching the remote forests near the Canadian border, but so far had found nothing. On the third day, everything changed. "Mrs. Wilson," Detective Harmon's voice crackled over the line. "We found it. The cabin." My heart leaped. "And what did you find?" "Evidence," he replied, his tone carefully measured. "Evidence that someone has been living there, possibly for years. Food supplies, clothing, medical equipment. A bunker system beneath the main structure, just as he described. And documents. Papers with your son's name on them. Old newspapers with articles about his accident circled in red marker." My hand trembled so badly I nearly dropped the phone. So he was telling the truth? "It appears he was being held there, yes," Detective Harmon confirmed. "Whether by Peterson or someone else, and whether he is indeed your son, are still open questions. But his knowledge of the location and its contents lend considerable credibility to his story." Meanwhile, we'd taken DNA samples for testing, comparing this man's DNA to mine. The results would take time, but they would provide a definitive answer about whether he could possibly be my son. One evening, a package was left on our porch, a USB drive with a note signed JP. On it, a video confession from James Peterson himself. Peterson explained everything. The night of the accident, he'd been the first EMT on scene. Daniel was alive but injured. Then another vehicle arrived, a red pickup driven by the county sheriff, Frank Holloway, who had been the one to run Daniel off the road. Drunk after a political fundraiser, Holloway threatened Peterson, demanding he take care of the situation, to avoid being identified as the drunk driver. Fearing for his life and Daniel's, Peterson had sedated Daniel and declared him dead at the scene. He'd substituted an unidentified body from the morgue, a homeless man who'd died of exposure, as Daniel's, then taken the still sedated Daniel to his grandfather's remote cabin. "I told myself it was temporary," Peterson said in the video, his face haggard with regret. "Just until I could find a way to expose Holloway safely." But days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Holloway had friends in high places. I became convinced he knew I hadn't killed you, that he was looking for both of us. Peterson had kept Daniel hidden for 15 years, convinced they were both in danger. What had begun as protection had twisted into imprisonment, isolation, and control. The police took the video as evidence, launching investigations into both Peterson and former Sheriff Holloway, who had moved to Florida years ago after losing re-election. While the investigation continued, the DNA results finally arrived. A phone call from the lab confirming what my heart had already known. The man staying in our guest room was indeed Daniel Wilson, my son. Jenny was with me when the call came, having taken the day off from the clinic to be home for this moment. I put the phone on speaker, so she could hear the technician's clinical confirmation. The results show a 99.9% probability of a maternal relationship between Margaret Wilson and the subject. In layman's terms, this confirms he is your son. Jenny's hand flew to her mouth, tears springing to her eyes. For all her caution, all her skepticism, she had wanted to believe too. In the weeks that followed, our family began the strange, challenging process of reconnection after 15 unimaginable years apart. Daniel's legal status had to be restored. A complicated process of undoing a death certificate, reinstating identification, navigating the bureaucratic maze of bringing someone back from legal death. Emotionally, the adjustment was even more complex. Daniel had lost 15 years of his life, from age 22 to 37, kept isolated in a remote cabin by a man whose delusions had stolen not just Daniel's freedom, but our family's truth. The police eventually located and arrested both Peterson and former Sheriff Holloway. Peterson turned himself in at the Canadian border, confessing to everything. Holloway was apprehended at his Florida home, loudly proclaiming his innocence despite the mounting evidence against him. They're both facing significant prison time, Detective Harmon informed us during one of his regular visits. Peterson's cooperation may mitigate his sentence somewhat, but given the severity and duration of his actions, he's looking at a minimum of 10 years. Holloway will likely face even more. Daniel asked to speak with Peterson before the trial, a request that shocked me. "Why would you want to do that?" I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. This man had stolen 15 years from my son, from our family. I have questions only he can answer, Daniel said simply. About the cabin, about those years. Things I need to know to make sense of it all. The meeting was arranged at the county detention center. Peterson seemed diminished, his large frame hunched as if under an invisible weight, his prison uniform hanging loosely on him. Daniel, he said, his deep voice cracking slightly. You came. I said I would, Daniel replied, his tone neutral. The conversation that followed was difficult, painful, but revealing. Peterson explained how what had begun as an impulsive act to save Daniel's life had evolved into something else entirely. A twisted relationship where Peterson convinced himself he was protecting Daniel while actually keeping him prisoner for his own selfish reasons. I was alone my whole life, Peterson admitted quietly. No family, few friends. Just me and my paranoia, my fears. And then suddenly there was you. Someone who needed me. Who depended on me completely. It was intoxicating. Having that power, that purpose. Daniel listened, asked his questions and finally said, I don't forgive you. I don't know if I ever can. But I understand better now. And that will have to be enough. As the legal proceedings against Peterson and Holloway progressed, we discovered another shocking truth. Peterson had kept every letter Daniel had written during his captivity. Letters addressed to me and Jenny, filled with his thoughts, his grief, his hope of someday returning home. Peterson had never mailed them, but he'd preserved them, perhaps as his own twisted form of atonement. Reading those letters was heartbreaking. Glimpses into our son's isolated existence, his unwavering hope of reunion even as years passed, his determination to hold on to his identity, his memories, his love for his family. I had a dream about home last night, one letter read. So vivid I could smell your pot roast cooking, hear Dad's old clock ticking in the hallway. When I woke up in the cabin, the loss hit me all over again, fresh as the day Peterson took me. 15 years. So much life unlived. But I haven't given up, not really. Somehow, someday, I'll find my way back to you. And somehow, against all odds, against all reason, he had. 6 months after Daniel's return, on a crisp October evening, the three of us sat on the back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. Jenny was telling a story about a patient at the clinic, Daniel was laughing at all the right moments, and I was simply watching them, these children of mine, together again against all odds. You know what today is, don't you? Daniel asked suddenly, turning to me with a small smile. I frowned, trying to recall the significance of the date. 6 months since I came home, he said softly. Half a year already. Half a year, Jenny echoed, shaking her head in wonder. It feels like both forever and no time at all. That's how I feel about the 15 years before, Daniel admitted. Sometimes it seems like a lifetime ago that I was taken. Other times it feels like yesterday. Time is strange that way, I said. Especially around loss and reunion. It stretches and compresses, never flowing quite the way you expect. The adjustment hadn't been easy. Daniel had needed intensive therapy to process his trauma and reintegrate into a world that had moved on without him for 15 years. Technology had changed, politics had shifted, friends had married and had children, careers had been built. All while he remained frozen in time in that remote cabin. There were hard days, days when Daniel withdrew into himself, overwhelmed by the world he was relearning. Days when the legal proceedings against Peterson and Holloway brought painful details to the surface. Days when the sheer magnitude of what had happened to our family seemed impossible to comprehend, much less overcome. But there were beautiful days too. The day Daniel reconnected with his childhood best friend. Their initial awkwardness giving way to genuine laughter as they discovered the men they had become. The day he cooked dinner for Jenny and me, a skill he'd developed during his captivity. The day he drove a car again for the first time, nervous at first, then exhilarated by the simple freedom of movement. Daniel nodded, his expression thoughtful. I was thinking this morning about something Peterson said during our meeting, about how he kept me because he was lonely, because he wanted family. And it made me realize something, how lucky I am despite everything. Lucky? Jenny repeated, skeptical. Yes, Daniel insisted. Because even during those 15 years of captivity, I had something Peterson never had. The memory of being truly loved. The certainty that I belonged somewhere, with people who cared for me. That knowledge, it kept me whole, even when everything else was broken. Tears sprang to my eyes at his words. We never stopped loving you, I told him. Not for a single day. I know, he said simply. That's what saved me in the end. Not just physically, but here. He tapped his chest over his heart, where it matters most. As darkness fell, we remained on the porch, the night air cool but not yet cold, stars appearing one by one above us. There was still healing to be done, challenges to be faced, a future to be rebuilt from the fragments of our interrupted lives. But in that moment, sitting together under the vast canopy of stars, I felt something I hadn't fully experienced in 15 years. Peace. Not the resigned peace of acceptance that had eventually followed Daniel's presumed death, but the deeper peace of wholeness restored, of family reunited, of love that had somehow transcended even the cruelest separation. My son had been lost to me for 15 years. But against all odds, against all reason, he had found his way home. And in that miracle, I found not just joy but a profound reminder of what matters most in this fragile, precious life we share. Family. Love. The connections that bind us together across time and space, that survive even the greatest separations. The phone call that had seemed impossible, a voice from beyond the grave, had led to this moment of quiet togetherness, of healing and hope. And that, I knew with absolute certainty, was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Thank you so much for joining me. My stories remind us that the bonds of family can transcend even the most impossible circumstances. Sometimes miracles do happen, even after 15 years of heartache. If this story touched your heart, please give this video a thumbs up. It helps more people find these remarkable true stories of hope and reunion. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever experienced something that seemed impossible to explain? A moment when love and connection defied all rational understanding? Your stories matter to me, and I read every comment. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more extraordinary true stories of love, loss, and unexpected miracles. I share a new video every day, each one carefully chosen to warm your heart, and perhaps make you see the world a little differently. And if you know someone who could use a reminder that hope is never truly lost, please share this video with them. Sometimes the stories that touch us most deeply are meant to be passed along. Until next time, thank you for listening to Margaret's remarkable journey, and remember, even in our darkest moments, connection and love find a way to bring us home. See you on the next story. And at Virtuous Stories, we love you.